Imagine one day suddenly being forced out of your job or school and sent with your family to an internment camp far away from home, simply because of your race. Japanese internment camps were established during World War II by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt through his Executive Order 9066. From 1942 to 1945, it was the policy of the U.S. government that people of Japanese descent would be interned in isolated camps. Why would America do such a thing? Well, a tragic event happened that instilled the fear of the Japanese on the American people. World War II was raging. The United States was not getting involved until the Japanese bombed America on December 7, 1941. Just hours after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the FBI rounded up 1,291 Japanese community and religious leaders, arresting them without evidence of them being Japanese spies and freezing their assets. In January, the arrestees were transferred to facilities in Montana, New Mexico, and North Dakota. Many were unable to inform their families, and most remained incarcerated for the duration of the war. Concurrently, the FBI searched the private homes of thousands of Japanese residents on the West Coast, seizing items considered contraband. Because of President Roosevelt's fear of the Japanese Americans, he established Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. President D. Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9066, initiating a controversial World War II policy with lasting consequences for Japanese Americans. The document ordered the removal of resident enemy aliens from parts of the West vaguely identified as military areas.
Loaded onto train cars with other Japanese American families. There were guards stationed at both ends of each car, as if we were criminals. We were taken 2/3 of the way across the country, rocking on that train for 4 days and 3 nights to the swamps of Arkansas. I still remember the barbed wire fence that confined me. I remember the tall sentry tower with the machine guns pointed at us. I remember the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs from my barrack to the latrine.
President Roosevelt informed the Army to start directed evacuations on March 24th. People had 6 days' notice to dispose of their belongings other than what they could carry. Anyone who was at least 1/16 Japanese was evacuated, including 17,000 children under the age of 10, as well as several thousand elderly and handicapped. Japanese Americans reported to centers near their homes. From there, they were transported to a relocation center where they might live for months before being transferred to a permanent prison camp. The internment of Japanese Americans in the United States during World War II was the forced relocation and incarceration in concentration camps of between 110,000 and 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, most of whom lived on the Pacific coast.
As far as I'm concerned, I was born here, and according to the Constitution that I studied in school, that I had the Bill of Rights that should have backed me up. And until the very minute I got onto the evacuation train, I said, "It can't be. How can they do that to an American citizen?"
We saw all these people behind the fence, looking out, hanging onto the wire, and looking out because they were anxious to know who was coming in. But I will never forget the shocking feeling that human beings were behind this fence like animals. And we were going to also lose our freedom, and walk inside of that gate and find ourselves cooped up there. When the gates were shut, we knew that we had lost something that was very precious, that we were no longer free.
With so many people in the camps, it was super hard for them to prevent sickness. The camps tried to provide medical care. Many of the people who worked in the camp hospitals were Japanese American doctors and nurses who lived in the internment camps. There were not enough doctors and nurses and medical supplies. Also, conditions at the camps caused diseases. Because the camps were so crowded, infectious diseases spread rapidly. These diseases included typhoid fever, smallpox, whooping cough, flu, diphtheria, and tuberculosis. The camps could give vaccines to prevent some of these illnesses like typhoid fever and smallpox, but not other diseases. Bad sanitation caused outbreaks of food poisoning at many camps. Even though the camps were unsanitary, the Japanese Americans did the best to keep their meager homes clean. Multiple families slept in the barracks together. Many prisoners were given jobs. They all worked hard to take care of the little that they had left of their possessions. This was their new town, surrounded by barbed wire.
These barbed wire fortresses, called internment camps, ended in 1945 following a Supreme Court decision. The case was brought on behalf of Mitsu Endo, the daughter of Japanese immigrants from Sacramento, California. After filing the habeas corpus petition, the government offered to free her, but Endo refused, wanting her case to address the entire issue of Japanese internment. 2 years later, the Supreme Court made the decision, but gave President Roosevelt the chance to begin camp closures before the announcement. One day after Roosevelt made his announcement, the Supreme Court revealed its decision. The last Japanese internment camp closed in March 1946.
Prior to the war, most Japanese Americans had similar incomes and educational backgrounds. But after they were assigned to 10 camps across 7 states, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming, their economic fates changed. All internment camps were prison-like compounds with barracks, watchtowers, and barbed wires. But some were close to wealthy regions and others to depressed areas.
This unfair act of fear forced hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans to live out what we asked you to try and imagine: being forced out of your job or school and then sent away to an internment camp simply because of your race. Let's hope that our country learned from this betrayal of its own citizens because of fear. Ironically, we end with the words of Franklin D. Roosevelt himself: "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."